I'm Dan Drake. This is Front Up on Geno TV and Channel 99. We're very pleased to welcome back today Dylan Fernades.
Great to be here, Dan.
Now
Thank
our
you for having me.
legislator.
Yeah.
Last time you were just hopeful.
I know.
It was even before the primary.
That's right. That's right. It was well over a year ago.
It was in August. It was in August of 2016. Well, I want to start out by asking you a couple questions. What's been the biggest surprise you had as a legislator as opposed to a wannabe?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think the biggest surprise is kind of how much we've been able to get done in the past 11 months. I thought as a freshman, that freshmen rarely get a lot of things accomplished, and I've been pleasantly surprised about how much we've been able to get for Nantucket and also for the entire district and also the state. And so I'd be happy to talk about those.
We'll come back
pieces.
to that in a minute.
Yeah.
What's been your biggest frustration?
Biggest frustration is how slow things are, right? I mean, the legislative process is purposely slow, I think, because, for me, you want to go up there, you want to change everything quickly. There's a lot of problems we're facing across the state and on Nantucket, and you want to get the ball moving. But the legislative process is purposely a slow one. They don't really get anything done, but when they do, they try to hurry it up. That's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
But we, every bill gets a committee hearing, then it has to go through additional committees. There's a ton of advocacy you have to do at each part to move the bill forward, and so it's a process. I get it, but some things are, in my mind, just common sense, and so you want to move it through a little quicker. But there's certainly a process. And look, when legislation gets passed, it can change people's lives, right? And so there's a reason why it's slow and takes time, and often bills take several sessions from when they're filed to move through.
When you were with us before, there were 4 things that you talked about as sort of your main areas of concern. One of them was the environment as it was impacted by climate change. One of them was water quality. One of them was affordable housing, and I'm trying to remember what the fourth one was.
Opioid heroin epidemic.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
So, of course, the opioid heroin. In the context of what you've accomplished in the last 11 months, how do those fit in?
Yeah, well, we have this. One of my biggest priorities, and one of the things that I've spent the most time on, is the home rule for Nantucket on establishing a housing bank. And this is common sense to me. It's just a 0.5% fee on home sales over $2 million. So a $3 million home sale, someone is just paying $5,000 towards an affordable housing bank. So it's basically, people who are, multi-millionaires putting in a tiny percentage, a fraction of a percentage for housing for the rest of us. And we know Nantucket has some of the most profound housing issues in the entire state. Average home price is over $2 million. It's an island nearly 30 miles out into the Atlantic. So unlike Cambridge, which also has really high home prices, they can get workers from Revere and Somerville and the like. No one's coming out of the Atlantic Ocean to pitch in on Nantucket.
Well, there are 400 people who come over every morning on the High Line.
I know, and that's a problem because you want your workers to remain local, and it's not just kind of tradesmen. Teachers and doctors and firefighters are all having a really hard time making this island their home. That's a problem. So we're working really hard on pushing through this housing bank. A lot of opposition from the Realtors Association, which was one of the biggest lobbies in the state. But we've gotten this bill already to third reading, which is the last place before a bill gets signed into law. We have a large group of Nantucketers coming up to the State House this week to have a private meeting with the Speaker, where the meeting is just on this bill. And so we're pushing really hard on it. We've had advocates from across the district, and that's something we've moved far, but really need to push over.
Are there other people sort of waiting in line if this happens here?
For what?
A housing bank of some sort?
Yeah, well, I think there's already been an agreement with the land bank to administer it.
I don't mean here. I mean in other communities.
No. Well. So interesting question. So Provincetown has filed similar legislation. There's actually a statewide bill filed by a gentleman named Mike Connolly from Cambridge. He's the rep over there, to establish a transaction fee and establish kind of a similar housing bank. That's actually a statewide bill, so it would affect all home sales. This one is Nantucket specific, and frankly, I think it's important, and we're really explaining to leadership in the House that Nantucket's unique. There is not a single community in the state like Nantucket. And so it requires this unique solution to solve its problems. And so it's really Nantucket centric.
Isn't it also true though that Nantucket's uniqueness works against it sometimes in the legislature? Because people think, well, they've got all this money, they can do it themselves, they don't have to. I mean, that's been historically sort of an attitude that's been conveyed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the uniqueness is more, I've actually come across it more. I mean, part of my job, and I did my maiden speech a couple weeks ago after I passed my bill signing Massachusetts onto the Paris Agreement. And the first third of my speech was just about how kind of unique this district is and explaining that, for 2 months out of the year, we have some of the richest people in America, but the other 10, 8 to 10 months out of the year, there's people really struggling, and I can explain that well because that's where I come from. As you know, I'm the first person from my father's side of the family to even go to college, right? And so my mom's an artist, my father's a landscaper. We're not. Don't come from a family of rich people.
I thought it was in the tree business.
Yeah, well, he is tree business. Landscaper tree business. He's an arborist, is the technical term. But yeah, so it's my job, it's Julian Sears' job on the Senate side to be continually educating our colleagues about how unique this district is and how profound the issues of housing, environmental issues, and the opioid epidemic are here. And I think we've done an effective job at that. One of the pieces, when you talk about kind of how are things Nantucket specific, one of the pieces that doesn't get factored in is just the travel, how you get here, right? And so we saw this play out with the large kind of marijuana legislation that we took up, in the ballot initiative, which was flawed because it didn't have a piece in it, and in the bill that was filed, there was no island-specific piece. And so marijuana may be legal in Massachusetts, but on the federal level, it's illegal.
Right.
How do you get to Nantucket? Well, you either got to fly or you got to take a boat. Who regulates that? Well, if you're taking a boat, that's regulated by the United States Coast Guard. If you're taking a plane, that's regulated by the FAA or the TSA, federal organizations. So how can you legally
grow it here,
get pot to Nantucket? Well, then how do you test it, right? Because there's provisions in the law on testing. So is Nantucket going to have its own testing facility for the maybe 2 marijuana shops that open up? Probably not. The economies of scale there won't work. So we put it in a special provision in the bill that's Nantucket. It's Dukes and Nantucket County specific that calls on the Cannabis Control Commission to issue special regulations for the islands. And on Thursday, we're meeting with the Cannabis Control Commissioner, who was just appointed a couple weeks ago. And we're meeting with folks who are opening up. We're bringing up folks who are opening up. I believe it's the Green Lady on Nantucket, and a gentleman from named Jeff Rose over on the Vineyard, who's looking to open up a medical establishment over there to meet with them, and so we can hammer out what we want to see these special accommodations for Nantucket.
Will these work also with recreational marijuana?
Yeah. Okay. It'll be both.
And how does this address the opioid epidemic?
Well, it doesn't really. I mean, so we, I guess it does in a sense that law enforcement will be spending less time combating marijuana use and be spending a lot more time focused on combating heroin use.
There is a theory that actually marijuana can be the last step, or one of the last steps in weaning somebody off heroin. I don't know whether that's true or not. But
I don't know either. I'd have to look at that data.
I've heard that very recently.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't look. If Nantucket voted overwhelmingly for marijuana, it was over 60%. I don't whether or not Nantucket has a marijuana, recreational or medicinal. I personally don't have a stake in that. I don't care personally. But what I look at my job is making sure that Nantucket has the exact same kind of rules of the game and has a level playing field from the rest of the state when it comes to whether or not you guys choose to have it, that you have those same rules. And that was a big part of getting that special amendment for the islands. I think that's important. On the heroin piece, there was a piece that came up on the marijuana bill. There was an amendment filed about having a percentage of marijuana sales go towards combating the opioid and heroin epidemic. That was something I supported, but unfortunately it was taken out on the last version of the bill.
Do you think this problem's gotten worse in the 14 months since we last talked?
Well, we've seen the statistics statewide. So a recent study came out that said there's a 10% drop in opioid and heroin deaths statewide. I don't think we should be waving a victory flag at a 10% drop. And also, if you look at the data, the Cape and Islands actually didn't see a drop. It was other places in the state. I think we need to be doing a lot more, a significant amount more. Falmouth, my hometown, was featured on the national news a few months ago because one of the preschools in Falmouth, in a 3-year period, 12 parents of students have died at one preschool or one middle school. We have 4 middle schools, right? So that's that just shows you kind of how profound this is and how it's not just the acute instance of one person passing away. It has ripple effects on the entire
it's
community.
Interesting. I had a real eye-opening experience. Again, I said this last time, but this is your show, not mine. But I think this is
your show.
This is interesting. It's I was in a session in North Carolina where the Attorney General of the state was there, and then some businessmen talking about the economic impact of the opioid crisis. But both of those, the Attorney General and this other gentleman whom I know fairly well, were both talking about how they knew, quote, numerous families where people had died from this, which I guess I live in a very much of a bubble because I don't know anybody, but that I'm aware of anyway.
Yeah.
But it is sort of an eye opener when you get out there and hear this from people that people you consider your friends and contemporaries.
Well, I'm 27, and some of my high school friends are frankly addicted to heroin.
Because of painkillers to start with, you think, or just
one yes, the other one no. And that's it's really sad to see, and it's deeply troubling. So, how do we combat this? Well, once you're addicted to heroin, there's usually a 6 to 8 year period for you to recover. That's a really long period that has profound effects on not only public health, but economic security and the like,
and family and so forth. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so we need to spend a lot more money on the prevention end, and we need to there's a lot of good data out there that shows that if you go in early and use preventative measures, elementary school, middle school, that has a really strong effect on making sure that people do not pick up opioids or heroin. That the Attorney General announced 2 weeks ago that she will be funding these programs in middle schools across the state. We forward that information to the Nantucket schools. And then also, I filed a bill on this piece as well on the back end, on the recovery and treatment side. And, I'll just to pick on my hometown, you can, just in Falmouth, you can get acupuncture therapy, you can get equine therapy, you can have recovery coaches. There's a huge myriad of long-term treatment options out there, but there's not a lot of good data on which ones are the most effective, which ones are the most cost efficient. And if we as a state are spending tens of millions of dollars on this, and if individuals through insurance or just out of their pocket are paying thousands of dollars on this, we need to have
millions in the aggregate.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to have some strong data out there to show which long-term treatment options are the most effective, which ones lead to the best options for those suffering from this disease. And so I filed this bill. Doctors from MGH came up and testified in support of it. We just don't have a good kind of overall sense of the data out there when it comes to which long-term treatment options are the most effective.